Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Abhineet Shukla and with me is Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India will highlight the need to address climate change issues comprehensively, says Prime Minister Naren Modi ahead of the World Leaders Summit of COP26. Prime Minister Naren Modi discusses economic and people-to-people linkages with EU leaders. G20 nations endorse India's position on COVID immunization as a global public good, mutual recognition of travel documents. India and the US call for the perpetrators of the 26/11 Mumbai attack to be brought to justice and for Taliban to ensure Afghan territory is never again used for terrorist activities. WHO Director General appeals to rich nations to fund $23.4 billion plan to ensure equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. India extends ban on international passenger flights until November the 30th. And in T20 World Cup, West Indies beat Bangladesh by 3 runs in Sharjah. As India has created history by vaccinating 100 crore people against COVID-19, All India Radio salutes all the doctors, nurses, other frontline workers, and all those who got vaccinated and made this possible. Even though the country has achieved this feat, we caution our listeners that the battle against COVID is not yet over. We appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and also help others get vaccinated. During the festival season, please follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Naren Modi will participate in the World Leaders Summit of the 26th Conference of Parties or COP26 to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The high-level segment of COP26 will be held on the 1st and the 2nd of November. It will be attended by heads of state of more than 120 countries. Another important event, there will be the launch of Global Green Grids Initiative under the vision of One Sun, One World, One Grid. Besides, Mr. Modi along with his Australian and UK Prime Ministers will launch a new initiative for infrastructure for resilient island states. It is aimed at creating a coalition for putting in place infrastructure that can withstand disasters and lessen economic losses in island nations. Several bilateral meetings are also in the pipeline on the sidelines of COP26, including with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. In his departure statement, the Prime Minister said that he will highlight the need to comprehensively address climate change issues, including equitable distribution of carbon space and importance of sustainable lifestyles for green and inclusive growth at the World Leaders Summit during COP26. In the run-up to the UN Climate Summit or the Conference of Parties COP26, All India Radio brings to you a ready reckoner to explain the jargon associated with the summit. Under the COP26 Explainer series every day, we will bring you the terms and concepts that will be in use over the next fortnight. Today we shall talk about net zero.
Net zero emission means that all of the greenhouse gas emissions from human activity is removed from the atmosphere through carbon reduction measures to reduce global warming. Climate activists and the IPCC in its latest report have been insisting upon the goal of net zero by 2050 for all. For developing nations like India, development is the primary goal, which outweighs the push for net zero emissions by 2050. Further, India has been among the countries with the lowest per capita emissions. The target would mean that India, the second most populous nation in the world, would have lower space for emissions associated with developmental activities for its population. The outcome of the Glasgow summit would decide how this important aspect of climate action will be addressed. Abhishek Mukhopadhyay, AIR, Delhi.
As world leaders, civil society, businesses and citizens are set to come together to tackle the problem of climate change at the COP26, the UNDP has released a video to explain what is at stake. Titled Don't Choose Extinction, the viral video depicts a dinosaur addressing the UN General Assembly. Actor Jack Black as the dinosaur makes a strong case for humans to change their ways or go extinct.
You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday held a joint meeting with the President of European Council, Charles Michel, and President of European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in Rome. Leaders discussed ways to enhance economic as well as people-to-people linkages aimed at creating a better planet. Mr. Modi and presidents of EU recalled their productive virtual engagements in the form of India-EU leaders meeting in the form of EU plus 27 in May this year and 15th India-EU summit in July last year. During the meeting, leaders of India and EU reviewed the India-EU cooperation covering political and security relations, trade and investment and economic cooperation, as well as the Roadmap 2025 agreed at the last India-EU summit. They also discussed climate change, COVID-19 pandemic, and contemporary global and regional developments of interest to both the sides. EU leaders also congratulated India for its excellent progress on vaccination. In a tweet, Mr. Modi said they had a wide-ranging talk on deepening the India-EU friendship, particularly in areas such as trade, commerce, culture, and the environment. Later, Mr. Modi paid floral tributes at the bust of Mahatma Gandhi at Piazza Gandhi in Rome. Members of the Indian community gave a warm welcome to Mr. Modi there. The Prime Minister interacted with the Indian community at Piazza Gandhi. The Indian community in Rome were exuberant as they met the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi will hold a bilateral meeting with the Italian counterpart Mario Draghi tonight. Commerce Minister and India's G20 Sherpa, Piyush Goyal, has said that G20 nations have endorsed India's position that extensive COVID immunization is a global public good. Briefing media in Rome on Friday, Mr. Goyal said India got tremendous support for its suggestion on mutual recognition of travel documents, including testing and vaccine certificate. He said the agenda of the meeting so far have included several important interventions from India. Mr. Goyal said on sustainable development and food security, India insisted that policy must protect small and marginal farmers and conserve local food culture. He said on tax reforms, India has pushed the G20 nations to address the mismatch between source of generation of profits and jurisdictions where profits are taxed. He said on anti-corruption, India has contributed to the 5 think pieces related to asset recovery, information sharing, law enforcement cooperation, technology, and the denial of safe havens. He said India supports the G20's emphasis on women empowerment.
Broadly, the G20 nations have endorsed India's position that extensive COVID-19 immunization is a global public good. I'm also happy to share with you that we got tremendous support from the G20 nations for our suggestion on mutual recognition of travel documents, including testing and vaccine certificates.
The Union Minister said India strongly advocated for the inclusion of language against gender-based violence and supported the new policy framework of G20 on remote working arrangements. He said on tourism and culture, India highlighted the importance of recovery of the tourism sector. He said India welcomed the G20 focus on creative economy and preserving cultural heritage. The minister added that G20's endorsement of using data for development is under consideration. He said India has strongly pushed for the need for balancing data free flow along with trust. Mr. Goyal also said India's voice in G20 represents the voice of less developed nations and developing nations. He said India spoke for the low and middle income countries.
And in news just coming in, Prime Minister Naren Modi held a bilateral meeting with his Italian counterpart Mario Draghi. Our correspondent Divakar reports from Rome that Mr. Modi received a guard of honor at the Palazzo Chigi ahead of the meet. The 18th meeting of the US-India Counter-Terrorism Joint Working Group and the 4th session of the US-India Designations Dialogue was held in Washington, D.C. on the 26th and the 27th of October. Both sides reaffirmed counterterrorism cooperation as an important pillar under the US-India Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership. The United States reiterated its commitment to standing together with the people and government of India in the fight against terrorism. Both sides strongly condemned any use of terrorist proxies and cross-border terrorism in all its forms and called for the perpetrators of the 26/11 Mumbai attack to be brought to justice. They also called for concerted action against all terrorist groups, including groups proscribed by the United Nations Security Council UNSC 1267 Sanctions Committee, such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed. On Afghanistan, both sides called on the Taliban to ensure Afghan territory is never again used for terrorist attacks. Both sides emphasized the importance of upholding international standards on anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism by all countries. The dialogue affirmed the growing strategic partnership between the two countries in the shared fight against global terrorism. External Affairs Minister of India Dr. S. Jaishankar said that the Indo-Pacific reflects the reality of globalization, the emergence of multipolarity and the benefits of rebalancing. Addressing the 4th Indo-Pacific Business Forum on Friday, Dr. Jaishankar said it underlines both our interdependence and interpenetration. The External Affairs Minister said India sees Indo-Pacific as a free, open, inclusive region which embraces all in a common pursuit of progress and prosperity. He said it includes all nations in this geography as also draws others beyond who have a stake in it. Dr. Jaishankar said, India believes that our common prosperity and security requires us to evolve through dialogue, a common rules-based order for the region. He said such an order must respect sovereignty, territorial integrity, international law as well as equality of all nations. The minister said it envisages that countries should have access to the use of common spaces on sea and in the air that would require freedom of navigation and overflights, unimpeded commerce, and peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with the international law. He said India stands for a fair, open, balanced, rules-based and stable international trade regime in the region. The External Affairs Minister, India's approach is based on cooperation and collaboration given the need for shared responses to shared challenges in the region.
India-Israel Joint Working Group on Bilateral Defence Cooperation has agreed to form a task force to formulate a comprehensive 10-year roadmap to identify new areas of cooperation. This was decided at the 15th Joint Working Group meeting held on Wednesday in Tel Aviv, Israel. The Joint Working Group is the apex body between the Ministry of Defence of India and Israel's Ministry of Defence to comprehensively review and guide all aspects of bilateral defence cooperation. The two sides reviewed the progress made in military-to-military engagements, including exercises and industry cooperation. The co-chairs were also apprised of the progress made by the sub-working groups on defence procurement and production and research and development. The 19th India-Bangladesh Line of Credit LOC review meeting was held in Dhaka between the 27th and the 28th of October. The meeting reviewed progress of 43 projects being taken up for implementation under the Government of India Line of Credit extended to Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the largest development partner under India's Line of Credit program, with 4 LOCs worth close to $8 billion extended to it for undertaking infrastructure development projects in a wide array of sectors. Our Dhaka correspondent reports that there is a considerable improvement in the speed of projects with active cooperation of the project executing agencies on both the sides. It was agreed that the 20th bilateral LOC review meeting would be held in Delhi in April 2022.
The World Health Organization WHO appealed to G20 leaders to fund a $23.4 billion plan to bring COVID-19 vaccines, tests and drugs to poorer countries in the next 12 months on Thursday. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, speaking ahead of the G20 meet in Rome, said that the group had the political and financial power needed to end the pandemic by funding the plan. He said doing so could potentially save 5 million lives.
In a global crisis, there is no substitute for science, solutions, and solidarity. The immediate challenge we face now is to end the acute phase of the pandemic, including by ensuring equitable access to vaccines.
Meanwhile, India's Minister for Health and Family Welfare, Dr. Mansukh Mandavia, on Friday addressed the G20 Joint Finance and Health Ministers meeting through video conferencing. In his address, Dr. Mandavia said that COVID-19 pandemic has brought to fore the importance of international health regulations and the need for strengthening global health governance. While supporting the present proposal for Joint Health and Financing Task Force, India proposes that centrality of World Health Organization or WHO needs to be maintained in the health arena. He said there is also a need to synchronize these multilateral initiatives amongst member states as per their local context at national level. Dr. Mandavia also said that G20 needs to aid in increasing available funds to WHO, besides supporting ongoing multi-stakeholder mechanisms.
India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation DGCA on Friday extended the suspension of scheduled international commercial passenger flights till the 30th of November this year. A circular issued by the DGCA stated that the restrictions shall not apply to international all-cargo operations and flights specifically approved by it. The aviation regulator stated that the international scheduled flights may be allowed on selected routes by the competent authority on a case-to-case basis. The government of India had banned international flights on the 23rd of March last year to contain the COVID spread. Later, flight restrictions were eased under an air bubble arrangement with certain countries. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates from the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle @AIR News Alerts.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Prime Minister Naren Modi's visit to Italy and the UK and its significance. In conversation are Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, when we look at the Prime Minister's these two visits, and we are seeing after a lot of virtual meetings, finally they are having physical meetings, and the PM is there in Italy where he'll attend the G20 Leaders Summit. He will be meeting the other G20 leaders also. And the PM in a statement before he left for Italy said that in Rome, I will attend the 16th G20 Leaders Summit where I will join other G20 leaders in discussions on global economic and health recovery from the pandemic, sustainable development and climate change. How significant are both these visits as the PM meets world leaders at both the forums, Ambassador Sajjanhar?
As you mentioned very correctly, these are, after a long time, the first in-person meetings that are being held as far as global organizations are concerned. G20 meeting is the 16th. It takes place on the 29th to the 31st. That is starting from tomorrow till day after tomorrow. And you would recall that the last G20 meeting that was held under the chairmanship of Saudi Arabia, that was held last year in a virtual format in November. And before that, the meeting that had been held was in Osaka in June 2019, and before that in Argentina, Buenos Aires in October-November 2018. So this is after a gap of about 2 years that the first in-person meeting is taking place. So I think it sends out 2 or 3 very important and very clear messages. Number one, that we are slowly and gradually but surely moving towards the end of the pandemic. That is why there are increasing number of in-person meetings taking place. You recall that Prime Minister Modi had also traveled to the United States, both to Washington and to New York in September this year to have bilateral meeting with the United States, also the meeting of the Quad leaders, and also address the UNGA session. This is happening increasingly. Secondly, the fact that the Prime Minister has decided to go in person and participate in these 2 meetings is also reflective of the importance that India attaches to both these institutions, one G20 and the other the COP26. So G20, we know it's the 16th meeting. It was in the wake of the 2007-2008 global financial crisis that it was established. For the first couple of years, it used to be held every 6 months, and that is why, although it started only in 2008, that's about 13 years ago, we have the 16th meeting because in the initial stages, every year there used to be 2 meetings that were held. G20 has really emerged as the global organization, global platform where countries meet to discuss economic and financial issues. Since 2008, when it was first put in position, of course, the mandate has increased very significantly. And India is one of the few developing countries which is a member of the G20. G20, about 85% of the global GDP. It accounts for about 75% of global trade and about 70% of the global population. So it's a very important organization. Now, what the theme of the conference that Italy has identified for the 16th session of the G20 is People, Planet and Prosperity. And basically, it will be focusing on the main challenges, the most formidable challenges that confront the global community today. One is to deal with global health governance, because we know that it is about 2 years since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world, and the whole world has been reeling under its impact. Now, particularly Europe, Russia, etc., these countries are feeling the heat. We see there is also now related issue of economic recovery, resilience in terms of reliable supply chains. And then climate change issues are very important, energy transition and sustainable development, because G20 has also engaged itself with the sustainable development issues. And we know that these SDGs, 17 SDGs, they were adopted in 2015 and they go up to 2030. And that is a very ambitious agenda. So G20 is also looking very closely at that. Food security is another issue that has been added for discussion in this meeting. As far as COP26 is concerned, I think the basic focus is on climate change, also on sustainable development. And what has really come under a great deal of discussion is what is known as the net zero commitments that different countries are being asked to furnish. India has its own position, and India has said that it will abide by this at an appropriate time. But at the moment, it is only G20 nation which has met its Paris Accord commitment. So I think that is also, India has emerged over the last 5-7 years as a leader in the area of climate change.
Mr. Sajanhar, as you very clearly explained how climate change has become such a big issue in today's world politics, and we see that this is an issue which needs even further discussion, and that is what we are likely to see at the COP26 summit. The Prime Minister has also said that the COP26 summit will provide an opportunity to meet with all the stakeholders, including leaders of partner countries, innovators and intergovernmental organizations, and explore the possibilities for further accelerating India's clean growth. Ambassador Sajanhar, how hopeful are you that COP26 will yield a pathway for the future? Because we've also had a lot of cynics point out that there is a lot of talk which happens on climate change, etc., but there really isn't any movement happening on the ground.
There are two particular aspects. One is the aspect of common but differentiated responsibility. The developed countries which have a historical obligation. The second is the issue of climate justice. That is, they cannot have an end point and demand that all countries should reach that end point together. Because if we look at the global carbon space, we find that the United States is the biggest contributor to occupying the carbon space in the universe. That is about 30%. As far as China is concerned, it's about 9%. India's contribution is less than 2%. So, the world cannot demand that India also should reach the same stage as the other countries are, because they are the worst polluters as far as the world is concerned. Even if we were to look at it today, China accounts for about 28% of the greenhouse gas emissions. The United States accounts for about 18%, and India accounts for barely about 4%. So if you were to look even at per capita emissions, India has a much smaller footprint than most other countries. So while countries might say that India is a large polluter, but we see that about 1/3 of our population is still living without commercial energy. So our responsibility is definitely to our people to provide better living standards for them, to provide energy for them. We have done a great deal in terms of whether it is the Ujjwala scheme by which gas cylinders have been provided to people in rural areas so that they don't have to burn wood as fuel. There is LED lamps that have been provided to different households. Electricity has gone directly to different households. So energy efficiency is being improved, and better ways of better energy sources are being provided to our people. And this definitely will go a long way in protecting the climate, in ensuring that the climate change is not so very rapid. India has demonstrated, not through words but through action, that it is very serious as far as the protection of climate is concerned.
And in the coming days, we will follow Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit in Italy and later in Glasgow, where the Prime Minister is attending the 16th G20 Summit and later the World Leaders Summit of COP26. With these thoughts, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the T20 World Cup, West Indies defeated Bangladesh in a nail-biting finish by 3 runs at Sharjah Cricket Stadium. West Indies batted first after losing the toss and scored 142 runs at the loss of 7 wickets. Bangladesh finished their innings with 139 runs for 5 wickets. In another match, Afghanistan set a target of 148 runs for Pakistan. Pakistan were 123 runs for the loss of 4 wickets in 17.1 overs when reports last came in. Earlier, Afghanistan won the toss and chose to bat first. All India Radio is broadcasting ball-by-ball commentary of the World Cup matches.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Guardian says Biden meets with Pope Francis as the pontiff urges radical decisions at COP26. The Globe and Mail reports Trudeau warns of disinformation as it threatens democracy and global economy. The Washington Post writes, G20 announces new global body to respond to future pandemics, but stops short of committing funds. Financial Times reports, Moldova presses EU for more help to avert crisis over Russia gas deal. And Sputnik News writes, Erdogan vows to make Turkey one of world's 10 largest economies.
A quick look at the headlines once again. India will highlight the need to address climate change issues comprehensively, says Prime Minister Naren Modi ahead of the World Leaders Summit of COP26. Prime Minister Naren Modi discusses economic and people-to-people linkages with EU leaders. G20 nations endorse India's position on COVID-19 immunization as a global public good, mutual recognition of travel documents. India and the US call for the perpetrators of the 26/11 Mumbai attack to be brought to justice and for Taliban to ensure Afghan territory is never again used for terrorist attacks. WHO Director General appeals to rich nations to fund $23.4 billion plan to ensure equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. India extends ban on international passenger flights until November the 30th, and in T20 World Cup, West Indies beat Bangladesh by 3 runs in Sharjah. India is celebrating the 152nd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Turkey on their National Day. And with that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.